Howdy, guys. Welcome back to the Land Talk Podcast. We are doing episode 10 today, which is going to cover title insurance. I feel like we deal with title companies a lot on our end of the spectrum, but for folks that are looking to buy property or looking to sell property, I think title insurance is kind of one of those things that a lot of folks don't completely understand. So with me today, I've got Tassie Garza. And Tassie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Tassie Garza. I'm the owner of Attorneys of Texas Title. I've been in the title business since 2002. Um, locally born and raised, I guess.
Yeah.
Know a little bit about all of Rockdale, Milam County.
Yeah. So y'all are here in Rockdale. What areas do you generally cover? I know you do Milam County. We know that. But do y'all go outside of Milam County to try to stay in it? Where do y'all usually cover?
We try to stay here in Milam County. We can assist with orders in other counties. We just have to consult with the title company there and work out an agreement to buy title evidence from them since we're not licensed there.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. So title insurance, I feel like it's heavily misunderstood. So kind of give us some insight, I guess, to kind of start things off here. What is title insurance?
So, to me, the easiest way to explain it is it's kind of like an insurance policy for your ownership, because it has exclusions for certain items that cannot be covered. It would show who owns the property, who's the vested owner, and any exceptions to title. So, I guess that's, to me, the easiest way to explain
Right.
it.
So kind of compare it to like your home insurance. It's pretty similar because your home insurance is going to cover and protect that property, but home insurance also has exceptions that they're not going to cover.
Correct.
Right. So I guess it's kind of similar to that. But so talking about title insurance, why do you need title insurance?
Well, a multitude of reasons. Maybe there are deeds filed, but not all the owners signed the deed. Um, Tax liens, mortgage liens that don't come up. Somebody purporting to be somebody that they're not. An entity is going to sell the property, and there's nobody checking the entity documents. You go and buy the property, and lo and behold, the person you bought it from is not associated in any way with the entity.
Right. But I guess kind of to simple it down, I mean, you want title insurance for if something ever goes wrong with your property, right? And it's trying to hopefully avoid those issues up front, but also protect against the unknown, right?
Correct.
So, when have you seen title insurance used? Because I mean, obviously, most of the time, I'm trying to think back over the years. I'm not sure I know anybody who's ever used their title policy, right? So that's kind of one of the hard things about insurance. You don't need it until you need it, and then you may really need it, right? So, but what are some instances that you would use your title policy?
So, suffering a loss. So, a lawsuit filed against you contesting your ownership, contesting that they're an owner, that you're not an owner. Liens, mortgage liens, tax liens, a multitude of lien type issues. That would be, they're going to come after your property, and you're going to have to file a claim to get that process stopped.
Right. And I guess so a title policy in general, I mean, you're trying to find out basically all the things that are known, right? So I know how do y'all go about, so you're going to do like a title search, right? So you're going to go through the entire property. You're going to start from today's date, and how far back do you go to look for things?
So, very long time ago in the industry, I was taught 100 years.
100 years. Yeah.
So, the records here in Milam County, I think, go back to 1876, I think, when the courthouse fire was.
Right.
So, that's as far back as you can go here to begin with. But we typically go back to the very early 1900s.
So when you're going to search through the deeds at the courthouse to look for things from the past, what are you typically finding there? Like, what are these things you're looking for?
Okay, so we're looking for deeds or any type of conveyance documents, any leases, deeds of trust, any type of lien, child support lien, tax liens, IRS liens, a multitude of liens. Affidavits of heirship, showing when someone passes who their heirs were, so that you will know who to go check those names. Probates. We're looking for, making sure that the taxes are paid. There's no parties involved that got a divorce that didn't, properly convey their interest.
Right, and you're also looking for like easements. You're looking for, and basically arguably anything recorded.
Correct.
And obviously, if it's not recorded, the odds of you knowing about it go down substantially. So tell us about times and we don't have to go real far down this road, but times to where things have not been recorded but have popped up later. Like I think I had one recently to where there was one small section of a property that was vaguely deeded in the past. And so I go back to the sellers and I said, hey, there's no deed for this 1 acre in this back corner from whenever, probably 50 years ago. And lo and behold, they had a copy of it in their safe. And it was notarized, dated, everything correctly. But what I'm getting around to, you and I both know we run into stuff that is not recorded that most of the time you never find it. But I guess there are some times people do find it. So that's kind of interesting. But so how often do you run across things that are missing or you lose track of or...
A lot of times people, I would have to say it's lessened over the years. A lot of times people have documents that they mistakenly filed in the wrong county.
Right.
And when they go back and find their original copy, thank goodness they kept it, we can figure out where it was filed and go get a copy and, certified copy and have it filed here, which is nice. But there are occasionally times where things just don't get filed. I don't know why, but it happens.
Yeah, and I guess as far as, and we kind of covered this in a few episodes back, but just because something's not recorded doesn't make it any less legally binding or useful, but it obviously makes your job harder, right?
It does. It does.
So best practice always record it, but
yes, we can only issue a commitment and try to help fix certain things if we know they exist. If we have no knowledge they exist, it's awful hard to prevent them from becoming an issue.
Right. So when you're looking back in time, you're searching from deed to deed, and you're kind of matching those all together. And ultimately, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but title insurance, you're trying to prove that when this new person purchases the property, that everyone behind them, there's a cohesive kind of chain of title from one person to the next, all the way to this new person. And that way we know that they're not going to buy the property, and it turns out that somebody else actually owns all the property or part of a property or has an interest in the property, right? So
yes, that's the idea, is to minimize the risk of anything going amiss for the new buyer.
Right.
And if they choose to buy it knowingly, well, then they have the right to do that. But we try to make sure that we've minimized and cleaned up everything as much as possible or made the new buyer aware.
Right. And I feel like ultimately title insurance is about mitigating risk. And I think, and obviously we know policies are based on risk. I mean, y'all issue a policy, and we're going to get into underwriting in a minute, but some underwriters take more or less risk. But I mean, here I think it's about informing the buyer of exactly what you are buying, because it's not always straightforward. You may think that you own the whole property, maybe you don't. And at worst, probably almost every property we deal with has some type of easement or something to where somebody has a partial interest. It may not be a legit deed interest, but they have use of the property. So, I mean, I think when we do title insurance, I mean, the most of the time we're looking for, who has an impact on our property. I think on the commitments, we don't really get much of kind of the chain of title, look at things like y'all do, but
right.
We're mainly looking for easements, mineral rights, mineral deeds, reservation of minerals, all those, there could be water leases or something. But I think as an agent and a broker, that's what we're looking for, is what things have been recorded that affect this property. And those are going to show up on your title commitment, which is great. So, and then kind of backing up a few episodes, we're going to take that title commitment to a surveyor, and they get to reference it there, which is all good. So I think it's all about educating the buyer into what they're getting into.
Yes.
So what does title insurance cost? And you won't have to pull up the chart here, but so obviously you have to buy the policy, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody does, and it could be the buyer or seller, typically the seller.
Right.
But what does that cost?
It's usually, if I'm not mistaken on my numbers, it's like 0.5, no more than 1% of the sales price. It's a one-time fee. You don't ever pay it again.
Right.
That title policy that's issued is always valid to you. Right. Obviously, you can't transfer or sell that owner's title policy to another party, but it protects you further down the road if something comes along that comes up and it relates back to you. Then,
right. So if you're buying your forever home and you're going to live there for 50 years, that policy is good for 50 years, right?
Yes.
As long as you don't sell it.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
And I would say, honestly, it's valid to you even going forward. So owners moving, something comes up that goes behind you and you get drug into the suit and are facing a loss as well as being a prior owner, it could still be used to protect you then too.
Right. So even if you're not the owner, you can just have protections there in the future, even after you've sold it, because that policy covers from when you backwards.
It's always good to you.
Right. So like when we're picking out title companies, are there cheaper places to get title insurance? I have a lot of folks say, oh, well, my title company's cheaper, or or fill in the blank. Is that true, or is that just a made up?
Unfortunately, it is not true. Texas title insurance rates are set by the Texas Department of Insurance.
Right.
So we don't, they're all the same as far as the actual title insurance premiums.
Right. And they're based off the sales price, right?
Correct.
So no matter where you go in Texas, you're going to pay the same premium for your insurance.
Correct.
But what differs on title company prices? So I know y'all can, I guess escrow fees are not, right? And tell us what an escrow fee is.
So that's the fee basically for handling all the money. So, our services go far beyond just the title policy itself. We are the party that issues the settlement statement, handles the money, pays the taxes, pays the survey, disperses receipts and disperses all the funds, handles the issuance of the 1099. There's a lot more involved than just the surface of a title policy.
Right. And obviously, I guess as a title company, you have the choice what to charge for that escrow fee.
Yes, we try to stay in line with our, where the others are here in our county. I've seen some, in larger cities, they charge substantially more than we charge.
Yeah. And I guess y'all's escrow fees, I'm not going to throw your dirty laundry up, but they're probably what, $250 to $400, $500, whatever it is. But I've seen some in big towns that are like $750 or $800. I've seen some pretty, I've seen some pretty high ones. So to that point, you could go somewhere and get a cheaper collective package, right? Not the premium, but as far as escrow, there are cheaper and more expensive title companies. But as far as title insurance, it doesn't matter where you go, right?
So the only thing that really sets us apart is going to be, the service.
Sure.
To me, that's it.
Yeah. No, that's it. So we could go on that road. So you said service makes a better title company, and I'll just chime in because we worked a lot together. So, I think in a normal real estate transaction, obviously you've got a broker, maybe one or two brokers, right? You've got a surveyor, you've got a title company and a lender. That's kind of the normal group of folks. But I can just say that a good title company can make or break a deal. I mean, I have title companies that I've worked with before that don't respond. I've got to email them, I've got to call them. They're never there. Somebody's out every single day. I mean, it can make things really miserable really quick. So kind of, what do you think? I know you said service makes a big deal, but what's your take of good over bad as far as title companies go?
In my personal experience, it's the knowledge of the at least some of I know that there's a lot of turnover and new people coming in and going out, and you need time to get on your feet, but having somebody on site that can answer questions, that has experienced a lot more, has more knowledge to share on the appropriate way to handle things. Yeah. A lot of times it's just personality.
Sure.
Truthfully, that plays a lot of it. Some people just don't work well together for whatever reason. That's why there's a multitude of
Sure. And obviously we're here in Rockdale and we're in Mountain County. I mean, we kind of have a more small town way of doing things sometimes, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But I have a lot of people that want to use a title company in Austin, and I'm fine with one in Austin or Dallas, wherever. I mean, you're going to get the same policy. Odds are they're going to contract back to you here locally to get the policy done. But I feel like a lot of out-of-town title companies don't understand how things work here because we are kind of a little behind the times. So I like using, I've used y'all a bunch. I like using y'all. I think obviously y'all know how things work here, right or wrong, but y'all know how it works. And I have a hard time explaining to some of the bigger title companies, kind of how we do it, which, like I said, I'm not saying it's right, but we're kind of behind the times. We don't, so how long does it typically take to get a title policy in here locally?
After you close, depending on what volume, and if there's a delay with recording, you're usually looking at about 30, could be as long as 90 days. It really just depends. Yeah. We try to get them out 30 to 60 days.
Yeah, and that's the whole policy. And then commitments usually...
So commitments, our goal is to stay within a 7 to 10 business day range. Now, there are times that gets way off by more difficult title to run.
Yeah, things pop up. Yeah, sure. So, and I'm going to back up a little bit here, but what's the difference between a title commitment and a title policy?
So commitment is our commitment to insure based on you accepting the exceptions that are in there and handling and providing the items required in Schedule C.
Right. So a commitment's just what you are committed to do, granted you pay the premium, right?
Right. You pay the premium and, provide us the information to pay off the mortgage and all that good stuff.
Right. Mm-hmm. So on a title policy, you hear a lot about underwriters. Mm-hmm. What is an underwriter and what do they do?
So kind of like your car insurance, there's Geico, there's all these different underwriters that handle your policy, and then you have local offices with reps in there that work with them. That's kind of the same thing. So we underwrite with First American Title and First National Title.
Right. And I guess there's times to where underwriters have differences of opinion.
Correct.
Right.
They
So I guess, is it good that y'all have two underwriters? Is that, do some people have one, or, I mean, I guess I don't know that.
Most have multiple,
Okay.
unless they are owned by the underwriter.
Yeah.
And there are title companies that are owned by an underwriter.
Right. Okay. And so an underwriter, they're going to underwrite the deal, and obviously they're trying to see how much risk they're willing to take. Is that kind of a easy way to put it? And obviously some underwriters are willing to take more risk, some are willing to take less. But for whatever reason, I think of underwriter as a guy in some little basement room in the dark, like writing these policies. But I don't know who they actually are. Maybe I'll figure out one day. But
they're usually attorneys of some sort.
Right.
I mean, most of the time, we, based on the knowledge that we have acquired over the years, we know how to go about fixing those things. There are instances where I'm not sure that what we think is the best way to fix it is the best way to fix it and or to move forward. So we consult and we provide, here's what we have, this is what the concern is, what do you recommend?
Right.
Do we need to make an exception? Can we clear it? How do we clear it?
Right. And I feel like there's times where y'all kind of went to bat for properties that I've worked with, to where, we have this problem. Is there a solution? And sometimes there's not a solution, but I feel like if there is one or not one, y'all try really hard to find one, which I always appreciate. So, so walking through a title commitment. So 7 to 10 days after you get a property under contract, you should get a title commitment, or, somewhere around there. So what do you typically see in that? I know there's there's 4 schedules.
Mm-hmm.
So walk us through those schedules.
Okay. So your Schedule A is going to be the details of your transaction. It's going to show a proposed owner policy, a proposed loan policy, sales price, loan amount. It's going to show your vested owner and a brief legal description of the property. Schedule B is going to be your exceptions, things that are not going to be covered by your title policy. And then your Schedule C are going to be the things that we need before closing. So we're going to need a release of lien for your mortgage. We're going to need your social to do a 1099. You're going to have a valid ID. You're going to have to, it has a list of all the things that we require.
Right. And that's kind of your checklist. So basically, in order to get that policy, you have to check everything off of that Schedule C list.
Most of it we do for you.
Sure.
As far as like the seller's affidavit, that type of thing. There's really not usually a whole lot for the parties to do other than to provide the information necessary for us to get what we need.
Right. But if there is a big issue, and I'm thinking of what are some issues in Schedule C that we run into. It could have to do with correction deeds. There could be some things done in the past that need to be updated or corrected, and I guess those would show up there as well. So,
yes.
And I think a lot of it has to do with like marital status. Mm-hmm. So that schedule. Is there a Schedule D?
There is Schedule D. Schedule D shows the underwriter, the title insurance company, so like the ownership of the underwriter, the officers, directors,
right.
The title company you're working with, their officers, directors, ownership is also disclosed there, and your title insurance premium for both the owners and the loan policy.
Gotcha. I never read Schedule D. But I think kind of going back to earlier, I think Schedule B is the first, like when I get a title commitment, the first thing I'm going to look at is Schedule B. That's what I'm most interested in. And then Schedule C, I usually look at a little lighter, but but Schedule B is, like I said, and we've covered that in a couple past episodes, but that's definitely where all the exceptions. So if there's anything that pops up in the future on those items, you're not going to cover it, right? So those are exceptions. You don't get help on those. And so basically, it's kind of like if we know about it, we're not going to cover it. Is that basically the way?
Yes and no. So yes, we're not, without some sort of without something being done to clear that up, we're not going to be able to cover that. But there are ways to get certain things removed and or cleared. You get a survey, and the survey shows those items don't apply. If they're not blanket in nature, we can delete them. So there are ways to get certain things removed. Right.
And I feel like anytime we work a deal with an attorney, they're going to kind of nitpick Schedule B quite often.
They're good at that.
Yeah. And sometimes that's good.
It's a good thing, yeah.
From my perspective, it kind of makes things a lot more complicated. But that being said, my take is it's always good to take your title commitment to an attorney let them review it if you choose to. There are some things that they can suggest as far as pulling some of those things out. I mean, I guess you would argue less exceptions would be better, right? You always want to get that. And we have some properties here that, if they're subdivided on a large tract, and you're buying 10 acres out of 1,000, I mean, you may have 50 exceptions. And the bottom line is probably 80% of those don't apply. They were, who knows where, they were somewhere else on this 1,000 acres. So in a survey will help sort some of that out. But I think kind of a savvy attorney can pick through some of that stuff and help out. So the bottom line is, obviously, we're not trying to give legal advice, but I would always go get an attorney if you want to. That's always a good thing to let them review this. And they can also, so when you get this Schedule B, or actually the whole policy for that matter, the commitment, y'all usually give them a copy of all the Schedule B documents, right? Yes. So you're going to get every easement. You usually don't give out deeds, but it's all those exceptions. It's going to be easements, deeds, mineral reservations, water leases, fill in the blank. So that's the good thing, is the commitment in those Schedule B documents to your attorney, and have them read them over. And most people don't do that.
They don't. Most of the deals that we do, I say most, not all, most of the time the documents aren't so complicated that you can't just read over them and get an understanding of what it is they do. There are some times that I'm not even comfortable telling you that. Not even my title company brain would be comfortable explaining what it is.
Yeah, and that's the same way here. I feel like when I look at Schedule B and I'm representing a client, I mean, I'm gonna tell them, hey, that this is pretty typical. I've seen this all the time. It's nothing new. Not that makes it right or wrong, but it's not out of place. Now, there's some things that show up and I'm like, I've never seen this before. You need to go get more help. And definitely at a minimum, take those documents, read over them, read over the whole Schedule B, and know what your policy is not going to cover. Right. So
yes, that's the key.
So when you're issuing a title commitment and later a title policy, what are your typical things that just pop up over and over? If you were going to pick out a handful, what's like your few things that just come up over and over and over?
I would have to say more than likely an owner, acquiring property and then subsequently passing away, and there being literally nothing filed after that.
Right.
For us to move on to who got the property, where did it go,
right,
and why is Joe Brown selling this property? What happened to the other? How is this? There's no link. It's all like a puzzle in essence. It all fits together, the pieces one to the other, and if you're missing a piece, it delays. We've got to try to figure out what we missed. Sometimes there's stuff that, gets overlooked and we find it when we go back, and sometimes it's not there at all. Sometimes it's filed in another county.
Right. And so some of those would be like a cloud and title. And tell me what a cloud and title is.
So truthfully, it's just like, it's just something kind of a convoluted, we don't really know what this is type of thing. Like, I can't fully explain how Joe Brown sold the property when we can't find a deed to Joe Brown. It's just like a little gap in ownership.
Yeah, gap in ownership,
Documents not being filed appropriately, not indexed appropriately. It can be a multitude of things.
Right.
Some of which can be fixed, some of which...
Sure. Yeah. And a lot of things that I see popping up, like it's always y'all taking exception to lack of access. I feel like a lot of times folks think they have access, and then when title looks at it, there's no easement or deed to back up that access. So that seems to pop up a lot, which that's always a fun one to find. And you kind of mentioned dealing with probate stuff. I feel like that happens quite a bit.
Yeah, the access thing.
And we had a deal that we did recently, just when you have a previously recorded instrument that doesn't function effectively. So I think we run into that quite a bit. Or maybe the wrong person signed, or maybe they signed in the wrong capacity. I know we had some that were... they thought they were co-executors, and it turns out they were co-administrators, and so some of that's just kind of typos, and
it is
probably not intentional things, but just somebody overlooked and put the wrong word or whatever. So, but luckily most of that is curative. So when you get a commitment, and obviously the buyer should review that. I guess there is, and it's built into the contract. So obviously there's a time for a buyer to read those and object to some of those. And obviously if they have an attorney, they're definitely going to object to something. But I guess you do have kind of a curative period to where you can try to fix some of those problems. And obviously we know sometimes they're fixable, and we have some that are just not fixable.
Right.
So if a property has major problems, I mean, how long could it take to clear some of those issues up? And we don't have to talk about the problems, but just if they're major problems, how long could it take to clear it up, and what would it take in a general perspective?
So if you're willing, I guess, to hire an attorney to file a suit to try to clear the issue, that of course is probably going to be the most expedient way,
Right.
to get that fixed. If you want to attempt to do it yourself, the longest one we've worked has been 7 years.
Yeah. So it could take years. It could take more money. It could take attorneys.
It never goes away. That's the key. The longer it goes, the further back in the past it is, the better off you are. It's less risky the longer time goes on, but it's still, interfamily stuff is super complicated for us because it's just more risky. There's more risk in that. If the property's been in the same family and they're just now deeding out, to me that's the riskiest transaction, is the one coming out of the family.
Yeah. So I know we were working on a property a few years ago, and it was like, the vested owner died in like the 50s, and he's still the owner of record, 75 years later. So I know we run into some weird deals to where, things are not always so straightforward. And I think we see people that try to go to different title companies with the same information. You're talking about the fact that it never goes away. I think a lot of folks think, well, Attorneys of Texas wouldn't insure me, so I'm going to go to another one. And odds are they're going to find the same thing. Now, that being said, to play devil's advocate, there are some times to where you go to one title company and they won't insure it because their underwriters don't want to. But you go to another one and they will insure the same problem, right? So I guess there is a little bit of, and that gets back to that risk management on their part. So
it's just it's title insurance really is just a lot of it is just risk assessment.
Right.
What type of risk are we putting, the policy at, the underwriter at, the title company at? Like, what are our risks here? How long has it been since the issue occurred? How many deeds are there in between? It's truly a risk analysis, and some underwriters are a little more conservative.
Yeah.
And others are like, it's been too long, just let it go.
Yeah. And like you said, like the longer time that has passed, the less problem that probably is. And obviously the title, I guess they don't want you to use your policy, right? It's just it's just like our house policy.
Correct.
They hope you don't have to use it, and they're gonna, try to insure it in a way where they're pretty confident that you're not gonna have to use it, which is good. I feel like title insurance is one of those things I don't want to have to use it, but
I'd rather you not either.
If I ever have to use it, like, you're gonna be thankful you have it. So, so kind of walking forward a little bit more, if you are gonna give like some tips or tricks to make a property transfer easier in the future, to kind of avoid some of these clouds in title, that sort of thing, what are some things you suggest to kind of make that better?
So I would suggest, first of all, making sure that, if you have a will or you've done estate planning, that your children or your heirs probate the will. Simply having the will and presenting it to a title company is not going to do what you need it to do if it hasn't gone through some sort of probate process. If you inherited the property and you have the will and you don't know what to do as far as probate, going to an attorney and telling them what you're trying to do. There's different types of probates or an affidavit of heirship that you could do that might, they're going to cost different, but they're going to get you what you need to be able to get things done. Making sure that even though your documents are recorded, I would say hang on to them. That's just always been my thing. You never know what's going to happen.
And a lot of times, like, surveys don't get recorded.
No, they do not.
A lot of times, we know that the field notes are the most important part of those. The plat is second to that, but if you can have both, that's always better.
Yeah, you need the survey and the plat. So yeah, the plat typically does not get recorded. So if you would need to hang on to that.
And I think a lot of times, like, what was recorded didn't have a stamp on there. So we run into that all the time, to where, yes, it was a survey, but somebody copied the field notes over and threw it in a deed. And then I guess it's a legitimate survey, but you can't prove who it was from.
We don't know who did it. Yeah. So when you do that, we can't tell, like a local title company could look at that and go, oh, I know that signature. The seal could be missing, and we're going to know who it was. And so it makes it a little easier for us to track down what surveyor might have done that survey, so that, if nothing else, you can go back to them and have it resurveyed, and maybe it would move a little faster this time.
Right. And I think, like, when we bring a contract to you, you're usually going to give some kind of questionnaire of what can the seller provide to you to make things easier and save a little time and a little work. And yeah, I feel like we always run into, do you have a survey? Do you have your last title policy? Also, that just saves some time. You don't have to have it.
Nope.
But it saves some time and a little bit of work and makes things move a little faster.
It does.
But yeah, I always tell people hold on to all that stuff, put it in a file somewhere, don't lose it. And then the big thing, we run into probate stuff all the time. So, when people die without a will, then you have to have airships to kind of figure out where that property should have gone. And I think probably a really easy one to take care of is like if your will was probated in Williamson County and you have a property in Mom County, go ahead and record that probate in Mom County. That would save a little trouble. So, right. So we've been talking about title policies, but somebody could come to a title company and not want a title policy, right? And y'all do things. Basically, you can help transfer properties without a title policy, correct?
Correct.
And I know on some simpler things, maybe there's no reason to get a title. But what are times that people choose not to get title policies? And it's not recommended, but I feel like when it's a family deal, maybe it's friends, they know each other.
Yeah, a dad is going to deed his property to his son, or he's going to sell him one of the rent houses in town, and they know the title. Their dad owned the property for 40 years, and so they don't want it. So yes, there are things that we can do to assist without. We're not an attorney's office, so we don't charge. Our time is free. Which is a good and bad thing.
Yeah.
But there are different ways. You could have a minimal title search done for just a couple of years to check for liens that you might not have been aware of.
Right. And we've done that where you just get a search so you know what's affecting your property, but then you don't get a policy to cover that. Right. And that's handy too. And I feel like maybe on properties that you did inherit or something where it's like, hey, I don't need title insurance, but I want to know what's going on here. I think that's a pretty reasonable option. But I guess y'all aren't attorneys, but you have attorneys that draft documents for you. Right. So if somebody wanted to come do an easement or they wanted to transfer the property or do something, they could come to y'all without not getting a title policy and still accomplish their goal probably. Yeah. So, and I think another time where people don't use title policies like distress sales, I feel like a lot of those are just off the books because they're done cheap and quickly, and it could lead to problems down the road. But it does, like I said, we always advise as brokers and agents to get a title policy. So looking at your title work and your title company, what are some battles y'all face in the industry today? As far as I know, there's always scams. There's always something going on that's weird. What do y'all see today?
So biggest concern is going to be fraudulent funds. Either you, the consumer, getting an email from somebody that appears to be from the title company,
right?
And they tell you to wire your money, and you just wire the money, and it didn't go to the title company,
right?
The email was intercepted from the title company to you, and they just replaced the wiring instructions,
right?
And now your money's gone because there's no way to get that back.
Yeah,
those typically aren't done stateside; those are overseas,
right?
Fraudulent cashier's checks, unfortunately, that is become an issue.
Sure.
Really, fraud a lot of ways around. Seller impersonation. Mm-hmm. So somebody purporting to own the property doesn't want to come to closing. They have a notary that they're insistent that we use, and truth be told, they're not who they say they are. They're not the owner of the property. The notary is working with them, and it's all fraudulent.
Right. And I think I've had an agent dealing with that lately where somebody, purported to be the seller and they weren't. And luckily they caught it really early. I know one of the fake checks you talked about was a check that dealt with me. So, and I guess you could tell folks like the check that we got looked very good.
Oh,
so it had like watermarks.
Oh, yes. They had to have stolen actual check stock because it was high quality.
Everything looked super good. It had watermarks, had everything you think it'd have. But yeah, that's just one of those things to watch for. And I think before that happened, I called you and said, Tassie, this seems too good to be true, so let's be wary. Turns out my intuition was right. But yeah, that's just one more thing to look for. And I think as brokers and agents, we just got to try to double check the best that we can that things line up, and just realize that when something goes wrong, I'm going to try to give you a heads up. Not that we're partners in this, but you get to deal with things. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It takes a whole group of people to get a deal done. So
for sure.
I think that's just kind of one of those things of experience. You've done it a long time. I've done it less time, but there's things that I notice and see, and you do too. So, but I think all in all, title companies are a great asset, and I think if you have a good one, I think they make things a lot better. Like I said, it can take a lot of weight off of a lot of folks if a title company will pitch in and help. So we're always happy with that. So, but anyway, that wraps up episode 10. So we'll catch you on episode 11. And I think on the next episode, we're going to be talking about property deeds. So we'll catch you there.